Okay, let's begin then. Alright, so on lesson 9, we're talking about world building. I'm gonna have a disclaimer to say I don't have super much experience with doing full on world building where, this fantasy level stuff where it's like, wow, there's one giant nation, there's like 500 years of history with like 20 different nations, and each of them have different cultures and magics and technology and politics. I'm just like, okay, yeah, no, I don't do on like the super high level, all right. But I still like to think I do have a bit of experience here and there, so hopefully you guys learn something. If you feel like whatever I'm teaching is not what you know from based on what you learn about world building, sure, fair enough, right? I think that's fine. I'll just teach from my experience, and you can take whatever lessons you enjoy. All right. Okay, let's start with the first question. All right, what's your favorite genre of books? Okay, audience participation. Science fiction. Okay. Rooted in reality. Okay, another one with science fiction. What kind of science fiction? I feel like science fiction is very general. Urban fantasy. What kind of urban fantasy? Magic, sci-fi. Okay, what kind of magic? Like, magic could be like present day magic. It could be like fantasy magic. Some people mix magic and sci-fi together. Like in the future, there's some people into technology, but other people who use magic instead. You have not been reading much, but you like urban fantasy and magical realism. Ooh, things like Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451 isn't really science fiction. I feel like that's dystopian, but okay, sure. Futuristic like Star Trek, Star Wars, and this game. Okay, you like the real world and not too far out. Okay, so for those who prefer books that are more like current day, right? In fact, why world building? Okay. For those who love sci-fi, you can answer also. Why do we do world building? Yeah. But for present day, think about it. Why do we do world building? Gives you a solid foundation. Why what do you mean by solid foundation? Sets rules and expectations. Okay. To give the world more depth and to add more reasons and stakes to characters. Okay. We want to imagine a better world to live in that eliminates a lot of things that plague us in reality. That one's interesting because we have dystopian books as well. Dystopian like Hunger Games. We do not want to be living in that world. So why do we come up with that? Yeah. Factions, powers, limits to power relationship, better idea of the settings. Okay. No retconning. Okay. So yeah. So world building fulfills quite a lot of purposes. I think world building brings, if it's a fantasy world, it can bring a person into a fantastic world, like, to like someone mentioned, right, escapism, right? For dystopian books, for instance, some of the plot only makes sense if the world was a certain way, right? We cannot, like, Harry Potter doesn't make sense if there was no magic, right? There can't be an evil wizard if the evil wizard is just an evil man who cannot really do much, right? So when you want to throw in an evil wizard, then it makes sense that there is the world of wizardry, there is the world of magic, right? And so from there you can, yes, you can ground it in reality. Like for instance, all you could do it in like a fantasy medieval. J.K. Rowling decided to put it in like, put a setting in London, like slightly olden London, right? Yes, consistency. Yeah, some people want to be presidents. But that's weird. Okay, another reason. Crap, I forgot. Another reason why you want to do world building is that, like, if you have a structure, it helps to establish like the flow, right? It helps to establish the climax and so on, right? And how it gets resolved, right? So example, if I want to make a story where like like say iRobot, right? The AI goes mad and starts to try to get rid of the humans and start to control the humans with the robots, right? um it wouldn't make sense if the world was like a magical place and suddenly there's AI, right? Because it clashes and then it doesn't make sense that AI appears out of nowhere, right? If you are in a world with magic, then you would build that plot on the magic, right? And likewise, if you don't understand the magic system or you don't understand the system of the world, then it's hard to give a satisfactory conclusion, okay, like that makes sense because it feels like cheating. Example, right? Imagine Harry Potter, he's fighting Voldemort, right? And suddenly he casts a spell that he somehow learned in a book, right? That never no one has heard of this spell before. He just like says a spell and then Voldemort instantly dies. That's it. Then as a reader you'll be like, what the heck? Right? None of this was explained. It felt like the author just dropped it in to give it an ending and that's it. Right? And so I think Brandon Sanderson said something, right? The ability of a mechanic to solve a problem is proportional to like the reader's understanding of the mechanic, right? If you feel like you don't understand the world, right, and the author uses it to solve the problem, then it feels like cheating, right? It feels like, oh, like 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 an unsatisfactory ending lah, right? Unsatisfying ending. So this is why even in places that have magic systems, right, like Avatar, they have to teach you the mechanic, the idea of, oh, the Aang needs to train, right, to grow his skill. So you're like, okay, this is a skill that needs to be grown. It's not like you're just born with it and you're fixed, right? And so you see his skill grow over time, and when he finally defeats like the enemy, right, it's satisfying because you feel the growth, right? If it's technology, right, if it's some time travel thing, they try to establish how the time travel works. So when you finally see him solve the problem, like defeat the evil or fix the timeline with time travel, you understand and it feels satisfying. You don't feel confused, right? Because if the you're watching a movie or reading a book and they're just like, oh, we did this thingy a magic and then everything is solved, then it feels very unsatisfying, right? So world building can be a powerful foundation for that. Yeah, can't remember if there's any other things, but yes. So let's talk about world building. All right, let's when you want to start with world building, you pick the kind of world to set the tone, right? You ask yourself, what's the genre? Is it dystopian? Is it a fantasy novel? Right? You can think of a lot of things like, does it take place on Earth, right? Is it alternate version of Earth, right? Some people will be like, oh, this is a furry story, so it's like Earth, except instead of humans, we have furries everywhere, right? You could do it in space, you could do it, I don't know, on Mars, you could do it, I don't know. Can imagine a different universe with different entities and they're just walking in like weird four-dimensional spaces. I don't know. Right. Does it occur in the past, present, future? So these are kind of things that you can start to pin down. The genre would set the tone for it, and the reason why is because like, a lot of contemporary romance takes place in current day, right? Because it feels more grounded, right? Whereas if you're trying to do some gritty novel, like gritty, grungy novel, like the first thing I'll think of is like dystopian, right? Dystopian, urban, with like, maybe a city that's run down, like the buildings are like half of them are like semi demolished, there's like metal sticking out everywhere, rubble, dust, then that's how you get the grunge, right? And so the genre of the book, then it will, yeah, so it will set the scene for action, right? So try to figure out like the genre, and that kind of shapes your world building as well. Yeah. Okay, then you can start to break it down. Like for instance, geography, right? Land, planets, case, stuff like that, climate, available resources, physical laws, right? So let's see. Did I leave anything out? Yeah. Why? Okay, so let's go through some of them. Okay, why do we need to care about geography? Let's say we're looking at geography. Why do you think we should care about geography? Geography sets limits for people, cultures. Okay, sure. To us, I guess. So think about it as when you have a world built, they are not separate elements coming together. They are there are things that push and pull and affect each other, right? So if you come out with geography, right, you think as very heavily desert, right? If there's desert, then it affect the climate, right? The climate means it's probably dry, right? But then if it affects the climate, then it affects the humidity or the water. The amount of water you have available would probably be very little, correct? And if you have very little water, then you are probably expecting people to be more conservative with water. That means their environment, the way they build, would require very little water. The way they live would require very little water, right? Production would probably reduce the water consumption. You probably wouldn't be taking water showers. You probably wouldn't have swimming pools unless you are a rich person. Um, like all these push and pull on each other, they will change the way people act, right? Available resources, right? Is the country, is the planet rich in certain resources, right? If you're rich in oil, right, you get Dubai, right, where people, because oil is so valued, they are a rich nation, right? If you have a world where metal is the available resource, then you would see people built with metal, right? Heck, their buildings might be made of metal as well. Their life will adapt around metal, right? If gold is common, then gold would obviously not be used as the currency, right? Something rare will be used as the currency, then something not common will end up being used in everyday material, building, manufacturing, stuff like that. Um, yeah. Physical laws, gravity, magic system, sci-fi technology. See, so even like thinking about gravity can affect, like affect the way you see the way people live, right? Like Superman, right? The whole idea of Superman is because on Krypton the gravity is stronger, and so the aliens have developed like lighter density or whatever, and which is something which is why on Earth he can fly because he's just lighter, right? Magic systems. So magic system, it doesn't have to be called magic specifically. Magic systems can refer to, like, I mean, Harry Potter is a magic system, right? But you can also use it to define anything like, say, Avatar Legend of Aang again, right? Because their magic system is the four elemental bending, right? Especially, and then the things you can build out of it, like metal bending, blood bending, sure, right? But it's based on a magic system, right? The idea of controlling elements, right? Another example would be, say, anything with superpowers, superheroes, X-Men, for instance. That's kind of a magic system where you can't really explain it. It just is a thing. What other magic system can you guys think of? Okay, let's see. Uh, Lame, that's an environment of metal. Okay, interesting. You remember reading on Tumblr complaining about white wedding dress because it's used in a medieval setting, even though it's out of place. Because a dwarven maiden from a cold mountain environment won't be wearing white silk for her wedding. Yeah, I would imagine so. Adapt, right? Okay, mutations, science magic, Dune spice. Okay, the Force. Oh yeah, the Force. Star Wars, right? The Force is like, I mean, you can call it a magic system, or basically like the idea of what your system is, right? Um, Yu-Gi-Oh. Okay, Yu-Gi-Oh works as well. Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess to a certain extent. So these kind of systems are very okay. Yeah, we'll talk about sci-fi first. So sci-fi would be, I guess, stuff like would usually go into hmm anything like machinery, I guess. Like, sci-fi, they're in space. Or sci-fi, we came up with like a time travel machine, that kind of thing. Like, oh, we have like AI robots, we have like laser proton guns, stuff like that. Star Wars is space wizard. But they kind of interchangeable almost. Yeah, nuclear radiation gives a lot of hero superpowers. Oh yeah, that's another form, like the superpower, superhero kind of deal. Yeah. So these systems are interesting because in fact you can think of them as a scale. They call it like hard magic systems and soft magic systems, where and I think the same kind of applies to technology as well. Basically, hard systems are those where the rules are very well defined. There's like there is this, oh, you have like give and take, and you have like oh, like for instance, if you think about chemistry has like a fixed set of rules. Physics has a very fixed set of rules as well, right? And in certain magic systems, like the harder magic systems, like they would maybe they for each spell they have this set of rules, and then it takes up a certain level of energy, or it takes a certain sacrifice. Like there are fixed rules to them, right? These systems, alchemy is usually very rigid, yeah, to a certain extent. So these kind of rules help allow you to use them as part of the plot resolution, right? Where if someone defeats someone, and like the protagonist defeats the villain, it feels satisfying because the reader knows how you got there, right? Because you know oh yeah, to defeat someone in a higher level, you have to use at least this level of skills, and we saw the user got this level, right? So it doesn't feel like cheating, right? um then softer magic systems will be stuff where the rules are not as well defined, right? Like Harry Potter, again, Avatar, Legend of Aang, right? The whole idea that, oh, okay, you have strength, and then you use it, and the more power you exert, then you become weaker, you lose more energy, and like we don't really define. So that one you kind of lose the power of using it as a solution, because if it you run the risk of making it feel like cheating. In fact, that's the term for this. Deus ex machina. It feels like God. What was it called? God in the machine or something. Basically, the author needed something to happen, and so the author stepped into the story and made something work, even though it doesn't feel like it worked. um, yeah. So you do want to make sure that if you use a softer magic system where it's not as well defined, you you kind of define, maybe you form another way to feel like there is progression, like you have to make it feel like the protagonist has earned the victory in their journey, right? And that's the important part, which is why, like in Harry Potter, you are supposed to have the Horcrux system is good, because now you can feel his progression. It's not like he ran in the forest for like 3 years and then showed up and then defeat. No, right? They establish certain factors, like he has to go through the hurdles of destroying the Horcruxes, right? After that, he needed to have found the Elder Wand, right? After that, he needed to have used the power of love and friendship, because a mother's love is more powerful, which is what defended him in the first place, and now that power of his bravery over friendships and stuff allows him to overcome Lord Voldemort stuff, right? So it didn't feel like cheating, right? Whereas what could have felt like cheating is Voldemort used Avada, right? And then he uses a higher level Avada that came out of nowhere and overpowered Voldemort, and then he won, right? Then it feels like you're cheating, right? Yeah. Plot armor? Oh yeah, true. Does it actually man, there's this Harry Potter lore already. I'm not gonna talk about that. Love hate with relationship with plot armor. It yeah, I don't know, man. You just be careful, right? Make it feel like the protagonist earned it. It's a bit difficult. Yeah, especially it's like a lot of like the chosen ones style stories as well. Um, yeah, a lot of these rules also apply to science fiction, sci-fi, because you don't want a scenario where like, oh, we're trying to do something, right? And then just before you fight the final boss, right? I mean, have you guys seen like scenarios where like, oh, the smart guy comes up and then codes something or creates like hacks his way into the file or creates like this special technology that somehow magically works and then gets you to the final boss and defeats him automatically, right? This kind of feels like cheating, right? So they usually, in those cases, they try, like movies and stories, they try to establish what they are like. Maybe ahead of time they'll say, oh yeah, I've been working on this for months, and then suddenly towards the end he finally gets it to work. Or early on they'll establish like, this is what they're doing, right? Another example of like hard, like soft science would be soft magic. Okay, let's take Inception, right? They established the rules quite early on. So to a certain extent, it's leaning more towards like the hard magic, right? They established the rules. You can go into a dream. Time dilates within the dream. You can imagine things within the dream. But so you can imagine yourself like with extra guns and stuff and overpower, right? But the more stuff you do, the more changes you make, the more the person's subconscious turns in on you, right? And so you with this basic set of rules, there is kind of like a push pull, right? Now, yes, you can imagine any gun you want, right? Or any, you can imagine like the best things to help you through, right? But the more you make things into your advantage, right? The more the person's subconscious will realize that you are there, right? And so there's kind of like a restriction where I don't want to use it too hard, and which is why when you get to the climax, right? Everything kind of makes sense. They're not taking advantage. In fact, they kind of don't really take advantage of the whole imagining new things. At the start, it was cool, right? It's like, oh yeah, oh, this gun, why are you using this lousy gun, right? I'm gonna switch to like a bazooka or rocket launcher, right? Boom, cool, right? But towards the end, when they resolve the story, they don't actually rely on these fantastic elements as much anymore. Why? Because they want to make you feel like you've earned the ending, right? And then they bring you close into the emotional touch of it, and like, oh my goodness, I cried, like came close to crying at the ending of Inception. Oh, it's so good, right? Okay, let me see. Usually you second guess yourself on the world building and internal logic, so you don't fix them. You don't so you don't fix them. Okay, wait, I'm not answering a statement. Yeah, but people, yeah. Okay, but does that make sense? Okay, I'm harping on this like magic system, hard and soft. I hope that kind of paints like an idea. Agree, disagree? Okay, let's move on. Okay, so people, right? How do they look like, and how many types of people are there, right? So most people just go with humanoid. That's kind of like the easiest, right? But you do have like maybe stuff like Golden Compass, right? The people have demons that take the form of animals, or you have Pokemon trainers who have Pokemon companions, right? You can kind of imagine different kinds of scenarios or like situations, different combinations. I could be like, oh yeah, this is like basically the world, but everyone's a fairy, right? So that's kind of cool to think about, aliens or like different species, different classes. In fantasy, you have like different nations also, right? How many types of people and nations are there? So why I ask this is because these kind of things will form tribes, will form nations, or it could be interplanetary communications, and because this will bring about societal changes, like such as what language do they speak, what laws do they have, right? What beliefs, what religion, celebrations, superstitions, history, right? And these can interact among the different people, right? If different tribes have different beliefs, right, then they start to fight, right? Or maybe even within a certain tribe, some people believe in knowledge and other people believe in strength, and then you start to have different priorities, and then you create factions within the people, right? If it's interplanetary, then you can come up with a maybe interplanetary legal council, right, to preside over the laws of the known universe, right? So all these kind of things, like they form like an idea of how to bring things into like into a structure, right? Because in the end, yes, it's a fantasy world, but people still have to act in realistic ways, right? If if someone punches someone else, that person has to feel hurt. Unless they somehow feel pleasure. Right? Like, okay, sure. But then that's a different mechanic already. That's probably like masochism or something. Something, right? But if someone has offended someone else, then the other person might turn into revenge, right? It turn into resentment, might turn into avoidance, right? This is the kind of thing you look for, right? And this will, so in the same way, if one nation offends another nation, right? Then it turns into fighting, war, right? Or they play political games, or they say, "Oh, I'm no longer trading with you," right? Or they start to form alliances with other countries and say, don't work with this country, right? And then you have politics, you have nations fighting, right? Then if this kind of thing happens often enough, right? Some people will also try to set up order, which is why laws and legal systems come into play, right? History, right? Why do people not want to work with each other? Maybe in the past hundreds of years ago, they were at war, and now the the hatred hasn't died down, even though no one alive is there to see it, right? Or no one alive was in the original war, right? All these kind of things play into each other, right? They are like push and pull. They they interact. It's you have to treat your world building like it's a it's a living thing, right? Because it is. You're trying to make, the world we live in, the universe we live in is based off interactions from physics particles on a molecular scale, the chemistry, brain chemistry, to how your brain works, psychology, biology, and then people interact with each other on social levels, and social levels create economies, create culture, create beliefs, create religion, right? And as society builds up, it forms like legal laws, right? As time passes, you get history, and all these things interact with each other in such like complex ways, and all this is tied into how the environment works, because the environment would affect, right? Again, let's go back to environment. Here's another example. If we have harsh climates, right? People might adapt a more ruthless idea. Like, if you cannot survive in the harsh tundras of this world, right, then we will leave you to die, right? Because why nurture a child who is struggling to survive in the cold when it's only a matter of time before they succumb anyway, right? And so these people might end up being more harsh. They might have a culture, right? You see, so we have a culture of like letting the weak ones die, right? And in that case, maybe they'll be more open to just having more kids and allowing more kids to die, because that's what happens in a harsh environment, right? Like you either sink or swim, right? Whereas if you are stay living in a more like comfortable environment, right? Then when people have kids, you're like, oh, I got to take care of the kids, right? Gonna nurture them, teach them, even though half of them are gonna grow up soft, but it's okay. We have the resources to take care of everyone, right? No man left behind, right? All these kind of things, like the environment shapes the culture, shapes the people, shapes the legal system, shapes everything, right? Um, yeah, make sense? Agree, disagree? Okay, make sense. Okay. Let's try some more, right? Adaptations, right? So now that we're looking at people, we look at how they interact with the environment, right? There's food, water, right? Again, is it readily available, right? I mean, there's a reason why a lot of the early civilizations they started near bodies of water, especially like rivers or lakes, because we need water, we need food, right? And then the water will slowly turn into agriculture, right? Because that's what you use. That's the natural progression of things, right? Whereas if you live in the jungle, right, further from water. Okay, so like if you live in plains, right, like where there's fields, people naturally grow, grow crops, right? But if you live in the jungle, that where it's harder to find space for crops, like people might turn towards more hunting because food, like animals are more readily available, right? Um, yeah. So someone says spending money like water is a Dutch expression, but in South Africa it would sound bonkers. Yeah, correct, exactly. Like it does matter. So cultural impact. So in the past, a lot of religious, like we sacrifice the cattle or we make human sacrifices to a god of rain to bring rain down, right? This so maybe if it's a more superstitious nation, right, they might come up with ways to do about rain, right? Think about what affects people, right? Affects a nation, right? If they are faced with if water is not a problem, then they would not have a religion about water. But if they continuously had droughts, then they will pray to a god of rain, right? See, um, what else? Death is also another sensitive topic, which is why we have so many like different religions with takes on what death is, right? Some people death is a process, reincarnation, right? Other people death leads you to heaven or hell, judgment, right? Other people believe death is just there's just nothing after death, right? How people fear death, how are funerals held in different places, right? Each of them have different beliefs, right? Egyptians would take like they believe there's an afterlife, but you need to prepare the body to be able to go into the afterlife, something like that, right? Because other people like Buddhism, you burn paper money so that the dead spirits can pay for like luxuries in hell, right? So these are the kind of things that come up, right? But you think about what people are concerned about, because that is what people form beliefs, cultures, uh, religion, what kind of festivities do they have, right? You think about Christmas. Christmas, okay lah. I'm just gonna gloss over the pagan history or whatever, but let's just say Christmas is from like celebrate Jesus' birth, right? That's something that comes from somewhere, right? Deepavali, Chinese New Year, right? They play a lot of drums and firecrackers. Why? Because it's supposed to scare away a lion that comes to eat the sun, and so they scare away the lion, so the lion won't eat the sun, right? So that's why we have cultures around that, right? What else we have? What other religions are there? There's like the Mexican festival of death or something, right? Look, all right, just look at what cultures we have. Ask what's the reason, right? A lot of these religions and stuff, all these cultural celebrations, it comes from somewhere, right? It's interesting to think about because it's what would apply to your fictional people as well, right? How did this belief come about, right? Um, yeah. So how do people interact and adapt to each other? Cultures, customs, beliefs, religion also by the way, economy. Yeah. Um Religion is interesting, right? Let's take a look at like history. Roman Catholics, right? The reason why Roman Catholic is a term is because the Romans they merge politics with religion. Where if you wanted to be a Roman citizen, you had to be Christian and follow the beliefs of the Christian beliefs as well, right? And so I think like the Romans found it as a good way to kind of control the population into obeying the government. And like I'm simplifying, but that was a system, right? This is taken. This system is also used in some games. I think, is it Warhammer that had that system? Let me take a look. Warhammer 40K. Like the idea of technology and religion being combined, right? People believe. So I think the scenario is a post-apocalyptic land, and no one knows how to make technology. And so the people who know how to use technology are the priests, right? And then they pray to some technology. Wolfenstein, is it? I don't know. Warhammer 40K. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think it's Warhammer. Then people would pray and have offerings to machines or something to get them to work. Um, so these kind of systems, like, you can take one system, see how you can adapt it for another thing. What other religious beliefs, right? In ancient China, like they believe like the emperor is the son of God, right? So you obey him no matter what. Yeah, and I think it's interesting, right? Religion, how the government uses religion to control, or how religion controls the government. How different cultures adapt to it. Is it a secular nation? Is it a superstitious nation? Right. And then how do people interact and adapt to surrounding people's translations, right? Politics, right? Do people establish relationships by marrying their children to the son of a king, of a neighboring country's king, right? Do they do trade? Maybe they trade. Or maybe a powerful nation, right? The weaker nations will send gifts as a way to say don't attack us, right? So cultural impact, right? So if tribes are constantly in war, like if people grew up in a place of war, right? People won't they would be they will value strength, right? What do you think they'll teach in school? Combat, right? They won't be teaching you how to read books because reading books won't save you in battle, right? And then you again throw in more religion, right? The Vikings, was it Valhalla? Valhalla. I don't know. Basically, the idea. Okay, Norse mythology. They believe that Valhalla is is their heaven, right? And you only go to Valhalla, if you die in battle. Like that's the idea. You die if you go to heaven if you die in battle. And so it definitely puts into kind of perspective what the place values, right? Whereas other religions, you go to heaven if you do good things, right? Like another religion, Buddhism, right? You ascend if you found peace, or like do good things, kind of like find inner peace, and then you go up the different levels, reincarnate into higher levels until you eventually reach nirvana, right? Enlightenment, yes. So these kind of things, like, that religions are influenced by what values people find are important also, right? I think that's kind of interesting to think about, right? Because if you go to a country who let's say you go to a nation that has to constantly war, right, where people have to fight and scrounge for resources, there's no time to help other people, because if you feed someone else, that's one mouth in your family that will go hungry tonight, right? That religion, a religion that promotes kindness to each other might not thrive very well, right? Whereas a belief system, a religion based around fighting, like survival of the fittest, would thrive in such a nation, right? So religion and cultures would generally be tied close to each other. Does that make sense? Okay, it might be sensitive because I'm taking religion and breaking it down into very like crude terms, but does it make sense? Okay, some twist the values for their own gain. Oh boy. There's also an example of religion being used for politics. Purgatory was made out of the Catholic Church to get money out of the people. Oh yeah, history, man. Is interesting. I will not comment on that for religious sensitivities. But it's interesting to think about how these push and pulls shape each other, right? Plant a seed and grow a tree out of it. Get the basic ideas and see how the world people in the world will make of it. Yeah, I think it's interesting because core beliefs would shape, they are shaped by the environment, but the environment will shape the beliefs, and then all these things shape each other, right? This, I think, all too often people try to like, okay, I like the world like this, and then they just come up with details, right? But it's not like you just throw a dice and randomize some names and randomize some um systems, right? Because that's not how you make a world, right? uh History, okay, how the environment came to be, blah blah blah. Okay, so I don't list everything, right? There's still a lot to think about. Other things can be like writing systems, right? What did people write on? Example, if people first wrote or like calligraphy, right, brush strokes with brushes and ink, right, their writing will be more fluid, right? Whereas if people first carved words into stone, their lettering would be straight lines, sharp edges. That you wouldn't find someone carving a curved letter into stone. Does that make sense? Right? Speaking, right? If you live in a place where there's a lot of predators, do you think people will be speaking or using or more likely to use sign language to communicate? Right? If you have predators and you cannot alert them, speaking would be the first thing that gets you killed. Right? So people will learn to communicate either silently or with sign language, right? And in this, they talk silently, then you probably will use words that sound clear even when you are whispering them. Because certain words, when you're whispering them, it doesn't sound good, right? Certain pronunciations don't work as well, right? If you're using intonations, and intonation is very important, right? Then speaking softly would probably kill your language. So all these things are very interesting to think about. Like, it'll be cool to live and breathe the world around them. Yeah. Okay. Any questions so far actually before we move on? Make sense? Agree, disagree? It's okay if you disagree. I don't claim to be the best at world building, but world building is a pretty fun exercise. It's like a relationship. It is. The world is an interconnected web of relationships, cause and effect, like push and pull. And doing any less for a world build would be disrespectful. We shape the environment shapes us. It does, it is. Yes. Yeah. Again, not everything, you don't have to worry too much, I feel. But I'll go into that later. You're not accustomed to writing longer stories. You never really had the reason to go deep into world building. I feel like it depends on your use case, right? If you're gonna do like real life but furries, you probably don't need to do that much world building, right? But at the same time, like, short stories can have very rich world building. So long as what I'm reading feels consistent, I think you're fine, right? If you're not gonna yes, it might be a fantasy world, but if you're not gonna spend enough time there to show us their religious customs, then it's okay. You don't have to come up with it, right? But like, if for the people who want to go into fantasy novels, this kind of thing is what you should be thinking about. All right. Okay, let's go on. Okay, so one advice: take inspiration, see what's out there, read more books, right? Read some dystopian books, read some romance book, read some sci-fi books, some historical stuff. I don't know, right? Just try some new stuff, right? Experience the world. I think there's a lot of books, movies out there that can give you quite a lot of inspiration for your world build. So Taylor says it might help to have a little world building for shorter stories. You might not dive deep into how the government works, but it helps to point out that magic use is very common. Yeah. So again, right, like if magic is common, right, and magic includes telekinesis, do you think people will be cleaning the floors normally? No, they will be using magic to sweep the dust out of the house, right? That's kind of how it works, right? Again, if people live in the desert, do you think they'll be more likely? Do you think they'll be like taking baths in giant bathtubs? No, they'll be taking showers or even sand baths to keep clean, Because that's what people adapt. Right? Adaptations to your environment. Okay, let's move on. Okay, info dump. What's an info dump? Okay. Oh no, you don't like info dumps. Too much info. Okay. So info dumping is when a writer presents the reader with a lot of information at once. Backstory, explanation, technical details, world building. Right. And you don't want that. Okay. So don't world build at the cost of the story. So sometimes when people come up with a world, they build and build and build, and then they spend all the time building, and they have like 50 pages of like the world, the history, the 20 different nations, their religions, their cultures, every single holiday written down, right? But how much of that actually makes it into a story, right? If you're not good, your story might be like few chapters, and then you go and defeat the enemy and you're done. Right? You don't have time to the main characters are not going to go into every single nation, celebrating every single like custom and holiday there before they move on, right? They're just gonna be there for a while and then they move on. Right? So not all the world building needs to be there. Right? You might be able to come up with them as you realize, oh, what do these people actually do? They're in a new nation now. What are their names? How do they name themselves, right? Like how do they what kind of things do they do? What kind of cultures, customs that now the reader has to learn? Don't give them everything, just tell them. Right? Not all the lore needs to make it to the story. It's okay to leave some stuff out. Some books, right, will take the lore, right, and then shove it in. Oh, but we already written it out. Okay, the 1984. If you guys read it, holy shit! Towards the ending, it felt like the author just wanted to end the story. But I did so much world building. I need to show the reader, and so for the last few chapters of the book, the reader, the main character, the protagonist, literally sits in a room, reads a book, and the book says, here's the history, here's what came up, here's what happened, here's all the lore that I couldn't express in the rest of the story, and so now it's in the book that the main character reads. And I was just like, what? And then in the end, the climax, boom, okay, the story is over. And I'm just like, what the heck was the book reading for? Right? Because it didn't come into play in the rest of the story. It felt like an info dump. I don't know why it's there. Right. Don't overdo it on the details. Sometimes the specifics will change as you write the story. Like sometimes when you're writing, you realize, oh, this doesn't make sense. I need to change it, right? So don't worry about the details. Sometimes the details, you can form the details as you write the story. Again, push and pull. The plot, right? The needs of the plot might influence how you change the book. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. Make it subtle? Yes and no. Okay, so here's an example of a story I wrote. Okay, is this also supposed to be a book that I eventually shelved? Okay. I'm going to put in... So it's a world build. I'm not going to tell you what the different terms are. I'm just going to read it out to you. Alright, and you see if you can figure out what they are. Okay. Without thinking, I slide my Omni out of my pocket and glance at the time. 7:38. 7th hour of the third and final shift of the day. Enough time to make it back to my office and pack up. The cabinet station faces the marble reception counter, a wall of 10 curved steel doors. Each one opens up to reveal a cylindrical capsule big enough for just one person. I join the shortest queue and wait. Like clockwork, the doors open and someone steps out. Someone else steps in, the doors close, and within seconds the cycle repeats. Right. When it's my turn, I step into the capsule and lean against the padded back wall. The doors slide close silently in front of me, plunging me into darkness. Hello, Mr. Evans, a female voice greets me as the capsule descends underground with heart-lurching speed. Your destination is the Operations Bureau Headquarters, 27F. Please enjoy the news while we ride. As the screen before me comes to life, the capsule slows down along the curved rail, so I'm lying on the back of the capsule. It barely hops before it shoots me headfirst into the network. Experts are optimistic as the Q1 GDP grew faster than estimated as manufacturing and tourism sectors The newscaster's smooth voice announces. Some people configure the screen to display a calm countryside, accompanied by soothing music as they're flung towards their destination. Not me though. I set it up to go through the news at 1.5 times speed. My capsule automatically syncs these settings from my Omni, so I'm always productive. Authorities have arrested 7 spotters in Somna after receiving several complaints. Gosh, off-grids are up to no good again. Budgets for the Operation Bureau has increased by 17% to 2.3 billion as the annual budget is announced. Sounds like a bigger bonus this quarter. I feel the capsule curve outwards as I'm hurtled through the floors of the Operations Bureau. The screen goes black. The capsule comes to a halt on the 27th floor. The doors open and I step out onto the carpet. Diffuse light panels on the ceiling illuminate the nighttime office floors. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So your guesses. Omni is some kind of phone. Capnet is the transportation, like a personalized MRT, like personalized metro or giant elevator. GDP is what? Somna slums. Possible, right? The urge to put a 1,000 Fahrenheit knife to some sentences is tempting. Oh, you don't like some of it? Fair enough. Off grid, some sort of marginalized, perhaps rebel group of people. Yes. So all these things, right, will come up later in the story. I'm not gonna info dump to you. By the way, the Operations Bureau does this. By the way, off grids do that. By the way, the Omni is something, right? What do you think the Omni is? Is it just a phone? What else does it do? Right. So, like, what do you see in it's been doing? Headset for information streaming. It feels like a stand-in for a smartphone. Okay. So the reason I named it Omni is because like omniscient, like it does everything, right? And so you notice it you can configure the screen. That my capsule automatically syncs these settings on my Omni. So like the Omni is basically in the context of the story, you will realize that the Omni operates as an identity system, right? Instead of like a passport or like a ID card, your Omni will contain your identity information. It will contain your settings for how you want your cabinet screens to set up. It will configure how you want your room to be set up so that when you tap it in, everything is synchronized, right? But I'm not gonna tell you that, right? When you go into a room, you will see the protagonist himself use the Omni to synchronize everything, right? Um, you will see the character use the Omni to make a call or text message. You see the main character do stuff with the Omni. You see? But the idea is I'm not gonna info dump to you what it is. Okay. Let me show you an alternative, right? Too much exposition. Without thinking, I slide my Omni out of my pocket. The Omni is an electronic device that everyone has to have on hand. It acts as their personal identification, their phone, and their access pass. On it is a digital clock that shows 3:38, 7th hour of the third and final shift of the day. We no longer use the 24-hour clock. Instead, we split the day into 3 shifts of 8 hours each. The first number indicates the shift number, the second number indicates the hour, and the third number indicates the minute. If a fourth number is present, it acts as the seconds. I have about 22 minutes left in this shift, which is enough time for me to make it back to my office and check out. Right. So this is when it starts to be info dumping, right? You're about to mute the stream. Yeah. So this is too much, right? Don't tell me everything, right? It's okay that the reader doesn't get some of it now, right? But you can make it come up later on in the story. Does that make sense? Yeah, you're fine with the first version because you can infer from context what the things are supposed to be. Exactly, right? So this is kind of like you don't give people info dumps, right? Weave it into the story. And if it's relevant, have it come up. I think that's okay. Okay, one more thing, okay, before we go to the homework exercise, okay, see the world through the character's eyes, right? If someone grew up, right, through in a country where it's poorer and they had to live life by stealing on the streets to feed themselves, right? If they go if they come to Singapore, right? Singapore, people people will okay. Imagine you go to a cafe and you want to take a table, right, and indicate that the table is yours. People will leave their phones on the table and walk to the counter to buy things and then come back. Because Singapore is secure, people will leave phones on the table, right? But if someone else comes in with who had to steal things to survive, right? Then they will look at the phone, and that's the kind of thing that catches their attention because they live differently. See, if someone grew up in the desert, right, they would feel strongly about people taking baths or spending an hour in the shower because why would you waste water like that, right? And so when they express themselves, right, if they are reading, you know, they would express themselves, right? And like someone mentioned, right, the Dutch, like spending money like it's water, right? That will apply to certain cultures but not others. So you don't want to use the wrong terminology, right? Another example, people would use they will have medieval characters, and then they'll have them say stuff which doesn't make sense. Like, oh yeah, I'll meet you back. Let me try to think of an example. Because medieval characters don't have certain things, right? Like say technology, right? So if they use terms that are based on technology, it doesn't make sense. Let me try and think of one. Okay, medieval characters, right? Imagine they say, uh, they touch something and I felt something like an electric shock. Right? Medieval characters don't know what are electric shocks because they don't have electricity, right? So don't make your characters feel an electric shock if they don't know what an electric shock is. So you say I feel a surge of pain, right? Or I feel like tingly sensation that turns into agony, right? Don't tell me it's an electric shock because they don't know what an electric shock is, right? Uh, yeah. Other examples, right? You saw earlier that the main character doesn't really care about cabinets. He doesn't tell you what a cabinet is, right? Because to him it's commonplace, right? If you were to walk on the street, right? Oh, I left my office building through the elevator. The elevator is a cabin where people stand in, and hidden cables will bring the cabin up and down to bring you to a destination level, right? I step onto the street. The doors open automatically because there is a sensor that senses people coming in, and then mechanical wheels will wheel them out of place. Like we don't talk about that because you don't pay attention to these elements when you are living your life, right? When you go about your day, you don't pay attention to this, right? So in the same way, if your protagonist wouldn't pay attention to what's commonplace in their world, they shouldn't be describing it. Does that make sense? Yeah, bring me a pen instead of bringing me a feather and ink. Well, exactly. They might have called those pens also. I don't know. Right? Do some research. Tell me about it. Okay, does that make sense? You have to live through your character's eyes. If they wouldn't pay attention to it and they wouldn't over describe, right? You walk on the pavement, right? You just say cars like rush down the street. You don't explain what the cars are, right? So in the same way, don't over explain, right? Especially for first person stories. Yes, first person and third person subjective, what was it? Basically are following the person, the protagonist. Yeah, one of the ways you didn't like the more brief explanation was that there's 3 shift hour 7, the headset 4 shifts. Oh no, it's not. That so this would later be explained in the rest of the story also. But basically that they split the day 24 hours into shifts of 8 hours each. Yeah, don't worry. Yeah. Uh, you have to make a balance. I'm sorry, you can't. If you do need to explain, just explain. Like I think that's fine. Uh, but don't overdo it. Subtle. Okay, keep it balanced. Okay. Any questions? Explain but make it chill. Just if it feels like a drag to read through, you have probably gone into the realm of info dumping. Come, any other questions? Okay, if nothing, let's go to the homework. Alright, so the take home exercises. Okay, world building. In this exercise, we will be doing some world building. Okay, after that, you will write 2 scenes in the universe that you have built. How you handle a fish out of water? You mean like someone who's not in the world? Well, the exercise will talk about that. In the first scene, the character is someone that's unfamiliar with this world. Remember the movie method lecture, right? Harry Potter would be looking at different things, right? Because he's unfamiliar. Meanwhile, Arthur Weasley, he doesn't care because this is his workplace, right? Harry Potter is the one looking around because he doesn't know. This is the first time he encounters it, which is why the camera focuses on so many random objects, right? In fact, that's basically Harry Potter. The first time you enter Hogwarts, the camera pans across all the different elements to show you the floating candles, the paintings and the moving staircases because you have never seen it before, right? Towards the end of the series, right? You're not even paying attention to the paintings, right? Because it's normal, right? It's part of your world already, right? So for the first scene, if the character is unfamiliar, right, how you can use that to explain is you could pair them with a person who's experienced. And then the person who's inexperienced will be like, what's this? What's that? Can I take it for free? And then the other person is, no, 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 you have to pay for it, right? In here we use a currency. It doesn't look like they're doing payment, but they're using telekinetic. Doing telekinetic powers, or like the card that they're using to tap on the machine. That's called a credit card. There's actually money in the credit card that transacts. Okay, you don't see it, right? But it doesn't mean it's free. You have to pay for it with the card. Whoa, right? Explain. You can pair the inexperienced character with someone who's experienced and use that as a way to explain, right? But in the second scene, I want you to give me the world building information, right? But you give it to me through the eyes of a character that who has experience with this world, right? So similar to how I did with the earlier story, the character knows the world. He's not gonna go into great lengths to describe it, right? Give the reader contextual hints to understand what's going on. Okay, make sense? Any questions? Any questions for the assignment? Okay. I think everyone is fine. All right. So with that, I hope you guys enjoy the assignments. You want to do an assignment for you? Oh no, it's okay. I write a lot of stories. I have too many ideas to write. Okay, you already have an idea for this. Very good. Yeah. Okay, this will be your second last homework, I believe. This is your second last homework. After that, we have one more exercise. Lesson 11 and 12 will not have homework. So you guys, well, we'll be wrapping up. 3 more lessons, you guys, then we're done. Alright, sounds good. All the best for the assignments, and then we will see you guys again next week. Alright, have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your weekends. Bye bye.